Hello everyone, my name is Vismantas. I'm a software developer in Shell APS, and today I'm going to talk about the application programming interface of material replacement function in Woodwork for Inventor. I will show you how to create the custom source provider for material replacement utilizing this API, why is it needed, and what can it do. I will explain the concept of custom material provider and its potential uses. We'll look into the replacement data model so you could understand how to manipulate the replacements. And also I'll show you how to create the custom material provider that reads materials from external source and provides the values directly to material replacer of Woodwork for Inventor. So in the process of creating a furniture model in Woodwork, we do not assign a specific materials to parts. Instead, we designate a material type. And just before generating the bill of materials, we can determine the exact materials and colors we wish to use. This decision can be influenced by various factors such as warehouse inventory, price, quality, and others. This flexibility allows us to generate different BOMs for the same item without altering the model. The same principle applies to hardware elements. For instance, in a 3D model, we insert a minifix cam of the required size, and just before generating BOM, we can decide whether we want to use Bloom or Hafele hardware for that. And this is where the replacement feature of Woodwork for Inventor comes into play. So, we have a replacement dialog where we can define concrete materials and hardware elements. While it is possible to type in name and code for each replacement individually, a more efficient approach is to leverage data from an external source. Our software Woodwork for Inventor supports Excel files for this purpose. This is a convenient feature and it allows users to map any Excel file to select replacements from it. However, the question arises, where does this Excel file originate? Well, the file could be manually created or sourced from a company's material provider or maybe exported from a company's internal database. While this method is functional, it requires constant monitoring and updating that Excel file as material and hardware availability can fluctuate daily. A more efficient approach would be to apply materials directly from the source, the company's internal database or ERP, and these systems are consistently managed and updated by a company's personnel, ensuring the accuracy of data. However, due to the variety of the ERP systems and configurations across different companies, it's not feasible for Woodwork for Inventor to interface with each one directly. To address this challenge, we've introduced an API for material replacements. And with the help of that API, we can create a DLL file that provides materials data to Woodwork for Inventor, enabling direct interaction with the source system. This ensures real-time accurate material replacement data, thereby eliminating any need of Excel files. So, how to create that DLL file? The creation of DLL file requires a skill set beyond that of a typical woodwork user, so this task is not intended for the furniture designer or constructor in a company. It is assumed that the individual creating the material provider has experience with the C# programming language and is familiar with using Visual Studio, so these aspects will not be covered further in this presentation. However, I will aim to keep the C# code as straightforward as possible to effectively demonstrate the fundamentals of material provider creation. So let's begin. My daily tool is Microsoft Visual Studio, so I will use it here now to create the C# project for our new material replacement provider. And to create the DLL file, we need to select a class library template, and I will choose WPF class library because I want to introduce some user interface to interact with the database. Okay, let's give it a name. And as I use Autodesk Inventor 2025 and it supports latest .NET Framework version, I'll keep using that. Okay. We now have a C# project that can be compiled into a DLL. However, this alone does not make it a material provider. To transform this project into a material provider, we need to add a reference to a specific DLL file found in the Woodwork for Inventor installation directory. This DLL file essentially acts as a bridge between your project and material replacement feature in Woodwork for Inventor. So let me add a reference to this DLL. And this file is already in my recent files list, so I don't need to browse for it. And as we added a reference to that DLL, we can use the interface iReplacement provider. The implementation of this interface is quite simple. It's just one method, and this method is replace. And this method, when user invokes material replacement request in Woodwork for Inventor interface, this method is called, and replacement data, this parameter, is provided. What is this parameter about? Let's see. This replacement data parameter is interface which can be derived by material replacement data for material replacements or hardware replacement data for hardware replacements. If a material has color properties, for example, laminated board or edge band, then material replacement data will be derived by color replacement data, which allows changes to both the material and its appearance properties. All of these interfaces contains a corresponding property, material, color, or hardware component. And each of these derives from the iReplaceable component interface. This means that they have some common properties. The code and name properties can be used to identify the object, and other properties are used to provide new values, which will then be used in the final bill of materials. Okay, so let's see how can we make the replacements. Let's go back to our code. And okay, we have this replacement data. Let's make some replacements for material. So I will check if replacements data is material replacement data. Okay, then I can take material. And let's set new code and name for that material. I will keep the new name same. I'll just add a prefix M to the beginning. Okay, and the same thing we can do with the code. Okay, I think that's quite clear. And else, let's make it the same for the hardware. I have a template for it. So I here check if replacement data is hardware element. I take the hardware component and I add a H prefix for name and for new name and new code. So now we can compile our solution, and in the output window we can see the path where our DLL file is compiled. I will copy this path to clipboard because I will need to provide it in Woodwork for Inventor settings. And let's run Woodwork for Inventor now. It's running already, okay. And I'll go to the design settings and I'll check the checkbox that I want to use the custom replacement provider. And I will provide this file from my clipboard. And that's it with the settings. Okay, now we can open the replacement dialog. And as I click this little button, my method is invoked, and as we see, prefix M is added to my material. Okay, that's nice, and the same works for the hardware, just prefix H is added. Well, great, that's nice. We know that our add-in works. So let's see maybe how can we use this to provide replacements data from some external source, for example, some database. And for this example, I have prepared a little database, Materials Access DB. It's a Microsoft Access database file, and here are some materials, some tables. And table names matches the material type names in my API, so it's easy for me to write queries. And each table has columns like code, name, image, and also I added some columns like producer, quantity in stock, and price. Well, just simulate some ERP system, okay? So that's my database, and my goal is to transfer the information from this database directly to replacements of Woodwork for Inventor. So let's go back to our C# code. And what do we need to do? So as we added a reference to replacements provider DLL, we can open C# project file. We can see that Visual Studio generated these lines for us to add a reference. And so we can communicate with the Woodwork for Inventor. And to communicate with the Microsoft Access database, I need to add a reference to, excuse me. Not working. Oh, here my template works. Okay, I need to add a reference to OLEDB file. And it's just because I use Microsoft Access database. And these lines will be different on what system you are referring to, and the developer should check the documentation for each system for instructions, what references to add, and how to use them. For now, I'll just save and close this project file. I need the C# code. Okay, now as I will interact with the database, I want to add some user interface for that. So I'll add a window for my provider, call it UI for user interface or user interaction, doesn't matter. Oops. And here's the exam code for the user interface. I will not bother you with that. I'll just show the final design what I created. Okay, so here we see a label for current material that we are working with, and a drop-down list for available producers, and a table to display the materials by the selected producer. Also, I added columns like price and quantity in stock, as we have this data in database. Okay, so that's our interface, and all we need to do is to implement for it to work. Let's open the code of our interface. So first, this interface will work with some concrete material replacement data. I will provide it in constructor, and I will use a private field to work with this replacement data later in other methods. Okay. And as we now have a material replacement data, we can have a material. And from that, we can assign a label for our current material label, and it's just name and code, so I can see what I'm working with. Okay, and the next thing we need to do, we need to add a connection to our database. So I will use OLEDB connection variable. And for my connection string, I will use the path to my Access database, and then create connection and connect to database. Okay, and just one more thing, when the dialog closes, I want to close the connection to database. Okay, so just a simple method on closing, close the connection. Okay, now we have a material, we have a database connection, and if we look at our interface, we have this label set. Now we need to get list of producers. How we can do that? Let's make a new method for that. Get producers. And method is implemented here. It looks like that. So what is it about? I take a material type, then I create a query to select distinct producer from table name that matches that material type name, and I execute that query against the database, and the results that I get are added to my combo box. That's simple. So next thing, when user selects the concrete producer, I want to select the materials just by that producer. So go back to user interface. I'll double click on this combo box, and Visual Studio generates me the handler function for combo box selection changed. And to implement this handle function, I have my template, this one. Yeah, that's I use it material type here also to select from table by material type, where producer is my selected producer. and as query gets executed, I load the results to my materials data grid. So that's also quite simple, I think. Yeah. And now the third part, when user sees the list of materials, when he selects, we need to apply replacement of that material. So I'll double click on this table, and a new method is generated that handles the selection change for materials data grid. And the implementation is also quite simple. I'll use my template for that. So first I set the values for selected row and material variables. Then I assigned a new code, a new name, and appearance for that material by using values from the selected row. And as material does not have a native price and producer properties, I'm adding these values to the added properties collection. And finally, after replacement is done, I just close user interface dialog. And all we need to do is in our main class, instead of adding this prefixes, we need to show this dialog. So it's quite simple. So I check if replacement data is for material replacement data. I create this dialog and show it. And I use it only for material replacement because our dialog does not support hardware replacement. But I think you will get the idea. Okay. So now we can compile our project again and run Woodwork for Inventor. As we provided the path of our DLL in Woodwork for Inventor settings once, we do not have to do it again. I'll just open the assembly model and run the replacements command. And now, as we click on replacements button next to material record, our UI is shown, which gathers the materials data from database and allows us to select the material for replacement. Here we have available producers, and our current material is cardboard. So I'll select some producer. Here I see the materials of that producers, and as I select this material, the replacement is applied. The same goes for laminated board, but here we have some more materials, some more producers because it's taken from other tables, and I can select some material, and for all other rows, the same. And as I added price and quantity to my added properties, I can inspect here two new columns: producer and price. And let's see how these values what can we do with these values? Where can we use it? So I made some replacements. Let me do some more. Okay, I think that's enough. Well, okay, so forage band one more. Okay, and now I'll just create a bill of materials, run BOMAP. And in BOMAP, I created two custom columns for price and producer, and keywords for these columns are item added property price and item added property producer. And these keywords can be used in an Excel template, for example, and they will be parsed. And if I expand the tree, next to material, I see the replaced material code and name, and also I have these values from custom properties. Well, that's great. Basically, that's all about the material replacement API. And okay, I want to show you one more feature. So we can replace this material here one by one, but it's boring. And I will show you a feature that allows you to apply the replacements for all the materials at once. And I'll close the inventor for that. Go back to our C# code. And instead of replacement provider, I will implement the replacement provider X interface. Basically, it's the same interface. It derives the replacement provider, but it requires to implement one more method. Let me implement it here. This method is replace all, and it provides not one but all the available materials for that model. Well, the user interface and logic behind it must be much more complicated than replacing records one by one. So I will skip it and just provide some random values for them, okay? So here's my code for replacing all the materials at once. And let me explain to you. First, I make a connection to my database. It's the same as in the first example. Then I use some random object to help me generate a query with random numbers. Then I iterate for each material, execute a query against the database by selecting random material by material type, of course. And then I apply these random values to my material properties. And that's it. Let's build solution 1 again. Every time I need to rebuild this solution, I have to close Autodesk Inventor, because when Autodesk Inventor uses that DLL, the DLL file is locked and I cannot rewrite it. So nothing I can do about it. Okay, and now as I added a method replace all, now I have this replace all button. And as I click it, my replace all method is invoked. And as we see, values for all the materials at once are changed. Well, that are some custom values. So that's all I wanted to share with you today. And for summary, well, in last minutes, we created the C# project to build the DLL, implemented the material provider logic, and retrieved the materials data that needs to be replaced. Then we implemented communication to Microsoft Access database. It can be any system, any other database, not SQL, not Microsoft, doesn't matter. Well, this basically it's a third-party system. And we successfully provided materials from our system to Woodwork for Inventor. Now user can interact directly with the primary material source. Well, it was quite a simple example, but I hope it provided you a good understanding about the API material replacement feature. And one more example of custom material provider can be found in SDK folder that comes with Woodwork for Inventor installation. Also, you can always write to our support team if you have any more questions. And maybe you have some questions that I could answer now. Well, if no, then thank you for your time and attention today. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions in future, and have a nice day. Goodbye.